It changed my life to have one solid experience of actual repair and forgiveness. I want everyone to have this. And the only way we get there is with all the little things, you know?
Welcome back to another episode of In the Meanwhile. I'm Nora Kenworthy.
And I'm Marcus Harrison Green.
And today we're turning our focus a bit more inwards to some of the more personal ways that people are impacted by and getting through the meanwhile.
That's right. As I mentioned before, these are lucrative times for my therapist.
Mine too. And I will also say that I really didn't expect to be still fighting with my spouse about who does the dishes during the slow apocalypse. I feel like we get one or the other, but somehow having to deal with real life and live through the apocalypse at the same time is a drain on my resources and patience.
I completely get that. I've been doing my best to equalize the labor in my own household, and like most men, I've been failing. So I was reminded of that just last night. But hey, it's today and tomorrow is another day to do better. So here we are.
Constant struggle.
Yeah.
But today we have someone joining us who can offer some particular wisdom about these struggles and the ways that we come into relation with each other.
Yeah, this is going to be an excellent episode. I mean, they all are, let's be honest, but super proud of this one. So let's get into it.
Awesome.
And it is a great honor and pleasure to be in conversation today with Dean Spade, who is the author of the recently published book, Love in a Fucked Up World: How to Build Relationships, Hook Up, and Raise Hell Together. Dean, it is so great to have you.
Thank you for having me on.
For those listeners who are not already familiar with your incredible work, Dean is a queer and trans liberation scholar, activist, writer, and teacher. He has worked for more than 2 decades as a leading voice for trans liberation, prison abolition, and mutual aid. He's a professor of law at Seattle University, and so much more. Author of the incredibly and widely read and practiced book, Mutual Aid: Building Solidarity During This Crisis and the Next, which I personally just picked up. Created many mutual aid resources for organizations like the Mutual Aid Toolkit, and most recently is the host of the new podcast, Love in a Fucked Up World, which just launched with an amazing conversation with the Adrienne Marie Brown that I encourage everyone to check out. Again, Dean, thank you so much for being here today with us.
So excited to talk to you all.
Dean, first of all, I adored your book on mutual aid, and I adored this book, and it was just a joyful read and such a lovely thing to engage with at this moment in time. As I was reading it, I was thinking about the very wide range of work that you've done in organizing and in liberation work, and I was sort of thinking about this hilarious interlude that you have in the first chapter of the book titled, "Yikes, you are reading a self-help book." And I was wondering, as you were writing this, were you ever feeling like, yikes, I am writing a self-help book? How did this happen?
Yeah, I mean, so bad. It took me 10 years to write this book, 9 years to write this book, in large part because I was racked with concern and shame about writing it. I
Yeah.
have always relied on a lot of self-help and healing tools and books. They were some of the first things I read as a child. And I have needed those tools, but I also have felt really critical of them and really been frustrated at all the, ways that they individualize our problems and take our experiences out of the context of white supremacy and patriarchy and ableism and capitalism. And I've had to kind of read between the lines a lot, and even also participating in self-help programs of various kinds, had to kind of look for what I like and leave the rest kind of vibe. But the genre is just, the genre is and the industry is about, you should individually get yourself out of this suffering that is, suffering that we can only get out of with collective action, to destroy these systems. And so at the same time, I have been in these movements for 25 years or more, and been just really seeing how the interpersonal drama and conflict and, not being aware of what's motivating us and following really painful, problematic scripts from our culture, that so much of that unconscious behavior, it really gets in the way of us getting together and doing things that we need to do to save our lives and destroy our opponents' horrible ecocidal, genocidal plans. And so it's been this push and pull for me, to like feel the need for this kind of work and also feel how stigmatized it is and how sometimes that's appropriate. And sometimes that's actually like just that we live in a society that's like kind of sexist and says like relationship problems are like girl things, and like that, like, let's get back to the serious stuff of planning this banner drop and these actions. And so simultaneously really wanting to bring attention to this area where there's so much dysfunction in our movements and in our social circles, in our lives, and then also feeling so self-conscious about it.
I mean, Dean, I know that the Dems are looking for the Joe Rogan of the left. I mean, I think we have found that, with you in terms of like a so much superior just human being to be able to actually process, these sort of interpersonal dynamics, if you will, that are going on. So, but all kidding aside, I want to ask you, this book really feels like it comes from a place of reckoning with just how bad things are right now. And they are bad. But you write early on in the book that we need each other so badly right now. And then later on, you observe the reality is that shit is very, very fucked up and intense right now. And we need skills for being with each other in distress just as much as we need skills for being with each other in delight. So you propose that love and connection, aren't just escapes from systemic oppression, but battlegrounds where the struggle continues. And so I want to ask, what made you want to center a conversation about relationships within the context of capitalism, white supremacy, and colonial violence?
Yeah, I mean, those are the contexts in which our relationships are happening, right? And a lot of people feel so much suffering in relationships, whether that's like, there's so much like distress in sexual and romantic relationships, and those are the ones that are the most dangerous for us. Like we're most likely to be like hurt or killed by somebody that we like are dating or used to date or want to date us or whatever. But also some people I know have like enormous agony over like the relationships at their job, in their organizing group, in their artistic collaboration with their roommates, like. And those relationships are shaped by living together in like a society that throws people away, that makes people into something you socially climb, that, makes people into something you shop for, that makes people into something you rank the importance of, like all of these. And it's just like brutal. It's like brutal to live in that, right? And all the specific manifestations of that in anti-Blackness and ableism and anti-fatness and all, just a zillion ways that happens to us. And that like our intimate lives are a battleground of that. And then those exact same frameworks are the ones that are used to like, slaughter people in our communities, to cage people, to make people's lives unlivable. And like, fundamentally our resistance isn't made of like institutions, right? Like the institutions in our society are all the things we have to get rid of. They're like terrible. They're like the colonial institutions for people who live in the United States. And they're the institutions that make racial capitalism go on. The thing that our resistance is made of is like our connections to one another, like our solidarity, our willingness to take a risk together, our belief that we're going to go break a rule together, that we're going to, actually have empathy for one another and notice each other's suffering instead of turning away from it as we might be told to do by a consumer society that wants to distract us. Like relationships are like it, you know what I mean? Like whether or not we can like stick together and like our group of 20 or 200 or 2000 can like make decisions together and like look out for folks who are the most vulnerable and like deal with it when somebody sexually harasses somebody else, or when somebody is too bossy, or when certain people are like, go missing, like, when somebody gets arrested, when somebody gets sick. Like if we can't do that, we can't do whatever it is that we have to do, which is a lot of stuff to deal with, like, as you're saying, like the kind of, the intensity of the moment we are at, which is really a moment of, fascism, ecocide, genocide, like right before our eyes, like just like it's stark. And your question makes me know that you read all the way to the end. They told me I wasn't allowed to put the stuff about like collapse into the intro. I had to put it in the conclusion because it's a lot for people. A lot of people
We
are in
read all the
denial.
way to the acknowledgements on this show. So,
I really appreciate that. So I think it's for me. I think that I think things are more dire than maybe even some people think. As part of saying that, I'll mention to you all that and to people who are listening that I've been co-facilitating a study group about facing collapse. that's still going on. There's 2 more sessions, and all the sessions are on videos are on my website if people want to like see what's already happened and then join for the last 2 sessions. It's sliding scale to 0, and it's through Zedek Chicago, and it's just a chance. It's so hard to face the conditions as they are, and part of it is like we're all in denial, which of course part of it is like there's just no way you could comprehend all of it. Then the level of the scope of suffering and the intensity and speed up of ecological crisis and so many other crises that are happening, but like the necessity that we actually try to face what's happening so that we can make decisions about our lives and our actions that are proportionate to what is happening.
I want to actually just ask you a quick follow-up on that, because we recently did an episode on empathy, and that was the catalyst for the episode, was that there are so many attacks now on empathy coming from religious right and other sources. As a matter of fact, they have a phrase now, toxic empathy, which I think sounds like an oxymoron, but apparently it's a thing. And
it's a real thing.
So I want to ask your opinion on why do you think there's this sort of renewed focus on, I guess, sort of brandishing caring and compassion as something that is evil?
I mean, how else could you justify ecocide and get people to participate in these like relentless extractive systems when increasingly everyone can see where this is going? Like, I listened to these really amazing episodes on Kelly Hayes' podcast Movement Memos that were about like long-termism and these theories that I hadn't been aware of about like that people in Silicon Valley and in the tech industry, some of them actually believe it's ethical to exploit planet Earth as much as they have to do this space race so that like someday we can all live as digital beings. And there can be like an endless number of digital beings who like live in space through these like extensive mining processes of Earth and then later other planets. This is obviously like ridiculous sci-fi stuff. It's so grandiose. Like the idea that they can like make humans live in space. Like we live in paradise. We live on a planet that we evolved to live on. We're like the air and the water and the food, just like, and they're like, no, we'll destroy that and all the billions of people who live here if need be to get to this like bizarre theoretical thing. And they think it's ethical. They call it altruism.
Right.
And so to me, that relates to like Elon Musk's recent statements against empathy. Like there's what do you have to do to participate in the kind of mining that produces lithium batteries? What do you have to do to even, and also just to even to make ordinary people who I know work at companies like, tech companies that are part of like ecocide. Like, what do you have to do? What do we have to do to numb ourselves? For me to wear this t-shirt that I'm sure is like partially plastic and will like live forever and was made by somebody under terrible conditions, no doubt. Like, what do we have to do to turn off our connection to like other beings and the planet so that we can like live under this much violence? And that they hate that we are like woke. They hate, and I love that they're anti-wokeness. It's so funny what slang gets into their mouths, right? They hate that people are interested in being awake to one another's experiences and to their own suffering, because that leads to action, collective action for liberation. And so like they're against being awake and they're against feeling empathy. I mean, it's like, it's bad. It's hard to imagine that it is compelling to people, and yet it is compelling to many people.
Yeah.
Right now.
I mean, as you're talking, I think you're reminding me of one of my favorite things about this book, which is actually that I think it recognizes that people who are coming into movement spaces or coming into relationships from movement spaces are often the people who are most harmed by systems of capitalism and white supremacy and colonial violence and racism, and also are people who are most attuned to the harms of those systems, right? Who are feeling things like climate grief. And also are the people who probably have the most trouble affording therapy under our current capitalist systems of healthcare. And I think one of the things that this book really does is it distills the wisdom of a lot of really brilliant therapy into the language of movements and to a language that makes sense to people in these movements. I mean, I sort of felt like I could have skipped 10 years of therapy and just read your book, because it was like all the most wise things that my therapist has told me over a decade. But you also write in the book that you really rejecting this notion of individualism at all, right? I mean, that's the kind of corner premise of the book. And you write at one point, there is no private life. And I think that really resonated with both of us as residents of a city like Seattle, where tech wealth and this like hyper individualization just steals so much of our ability to have collective grief and collective joy. And so I guess I'm wondering how you imagine us, just everyday people in a place like Seattle, beginning to learn how to re-collectivize some of our most intimate spaces.
I just want to go back to the first thing you said. It was just so interesting about, yeah, like, can reading a book help you skip therapy? I don't know. Like, that's one of the questions I had a lot while I was writing this book was like, what do books do? Like I've
Yeah.
read a lot of self-help books and books, meditation books and books about different healing methodologies. I have this question about like, I feel like I have to do all the different things I do. Like I have
Yes.
to have a sitting personally. I had to have a sitting meditation practice and also like a meditation retreat practice. And I also have to have like physical movement practices. And I also need to like talk to my friends about all the ideas. And I also sometimes need to like read memoirs or novels that tell me about other people's
Yes.
feeling processes. And I also need to go to 12-step programs and like
Yes.
all of the things, different things. And it feels like there's no.
Yeah, and sometimes I feel like we have to hear the same answer like 12 different times in order to like take it in and actually
And get the same feedback from others. Like you need to have
Yeah.
a person be like, I need you to listen to me in this way instead. Or when you meet a new lover and you leave and you ditch us, it feels like this. Or many of us, we need the same piece of feedback like 50 times from 50 different kinds of people. And it doesn't mean it was useless, the people who shared it with us and we weren't able to take action. I'm just also curious about like the process, like insight versus action. Like there was a lot
Mhm.
of patterns I had insight on for years through journaling and through therapy and through reading certain kinds of books. And then what was it that allowed me to ever like do something different? Like what was
Mm.
it? What's 10 years of being frustrated and having insight about my behavior or this feeling pattern or this delusion? Anyway, it's just interesting. This is like an unknowable, but I love that you're asking this question about collectivity and privacy. I mean, I think one of the things this book is heavily motivated and informed by, like, basic feminist politics I have, that
Mhm.
there's, the personal is political, that anything they
Mhm.
tell you is in the private realm. It's probably to control you and to shut you up, like don't talk about sexual violence or don't talk about, these health issues or don't talk about your
Mhm.
body or whatever. Um, and or we shouldn't talk about childcare. That's women's stuff. Let's keep this meeting focused on whatever. And so that if I think feminist and queer politics has really said like what is private matters, what's been labeled as private matters, and this is also true I think around like an anti-racist feminist politics that like domestic labor should be the unregulated labor, or like that often puts women of color into these quote unquote private spaces for special levels of
Mm.
exploitation. And so if we reject the private public split and also know that in capitalism, white supremacy, it's based on like private property, which we're like, trying to get rid
Mhm.
of and have everybody have everything they need and nobody be able to hoard everything. There's this question about like, what is our sociality? Like, what is it like when we are more available to each other? And this isn't about not having autonomy or boundaries. And that's hard. Like some people enter movements and they're like, I want to give everything to this movement, which is so right on. Like, I'm not going to hoard wealth anymore. I'm going to share everything, give it away. Yes. And I'm not going to like, plan for a future where I own a home when people right now don't have a place to live. And, this is good. This is like us shaking up things we've been told about our private security. But also I'm allowed to be like, I can't take this call right now. I'm not feeling well. Or
Mhm.
I can only support this many people who are currently who I'm currently trying to get into housing, or I can do these number of meetings, but not these, or I can't do it on these days because I do this other thing with my kids or with my parents or whatever, my art class, like like how to be like collectivity is not about eliminate, because I think just for those people who, and I'm one of the people who like will put yourself at the bottom of the list and will be like, everybody else needs first and I shouldn't have any pleasure until everybody's pain is over. And there can be some really like that can be one outcome of certain socialization processes. So when I picture, and I love that you asked the question about Seattle, because I just left Seattle and I'm in Berlin. And one thing I notice a lot when I leave the United States and pretty much go almost anywhere that I've been is that people are just hanging out more. Like everyone is just,
Yes.
especially if it's nice out, everyone's just outside and you meet somebody, you don't know them that well, you don't have that much in common, and they will just like hang out with you in the cafe for 5 hours. Like, why? Like, even if they're not trying to have sex with you. And you're like, why? Like, why do you want to hang out with me so much? Like everyone's just like there's like a greater conviviality. And like
Mhm.
people talk about this a lot between neighbors, and that a lot of this has been eroded in the United States. by lengthy commutes, by people spending much more time online, by the ways in which our solidarities are undermined, by the feeling that we should get what we need from institutions, that like I shouldn't be concerned about my neighbor who I know is like elderly and struggling. It should be like there should be a social services agency that does that for her, or like this sense that we are not each other's business. And I think it relates to also just not taking pleasure in each other. People do less like having a gardening club and a bowling league and a sharing childcare, and instead everybody's like kind of strapped, and people live on their own more than ever in the history of the world. And so like that also means like if each of us live alone, we have to like reproduce meals and have a kitchen that has all the kitchen things, and it's like expensive. Whereas if the three of us live together and shared a kitchen and shared a bathroom, everyone would have less cooking and cleaning and childcare. It's just like there's a kind of like atomization. I think that the tech industry is such a good example of that. Like in Seattle, this move towards building this kind of housing that's really about like this single guy, you know what I mean? And who can pay a really high rent, and like everybody else is priced out. And so I think like a lot of what this takes, the way I see this manifest in our day-to-day attitudes is a lot of people I know are actually scared of others, scared of live meetings, scared of phone calls, scared of having dinner with others. I have a lot of students who get really like riled up in class about like they're like really want to change things, but they're like, oh, but I couldn't possibly go to a meeting. Like there's a kind of feeling of like social anxiety that I think has been produced by being forced to be isolated and scared of each other, scared of saying anything wrong, not having a lot of experience of just like bumping up against other people in space and figuring out that you make mistakes, you get over it. Like a lot of like, it feels so high stakes if you haven't done it much. Don't have a lot of practice saying you need something, saying, hey, I didn't like what you said, saying sorry, oops, I didn't know. So I think that it's like what we need so badly is just like more opportunities to invite each other to things and go. And like, that's a kind of, and like, there's beautiful life that happens online for many of us, and many people get things they don't get anywhere else, but we have to have in-person lives. That's who's going to like show up when you have to go to the hospital, or when you need someone to bring you soup, or when you get arrested. Like we have to have in person. That's when the lights go out and the disasters that are constantly coming are happening. It's actually in-person relationships that we rely on more. So we need to do both. And a lot of us are really, if you have an only online life, I can have a filter on. I can control it, and I worry we're being de-skilled in those ways.
Well, I'm just wondering too, like how much of it is the fact that we don't have as many third places as maybe we've had in the past, right? I mean, I'm thinking again, just even at the infrastructure here in Seattle is like, where can we go to meet to just either organize or be in some level of, community or communion? Where can we go that isn't owned by some corporation or, or some business or, or something else? Like, I mean, where can we truly create, you just have a space for creation, if you will, in terms of, societal connection,
and not be harassed by the cops when you're there.
right?
Like, I mean, just to be honest,
yes.
like that, that's my experience of living in US cities is like, depending on what you look like and who you are, it can just be like, it's not safe, or all the way to like super unpleasant, stressful, dangerous, like, I don't know. I think there's just a lot of, I think that's a really big question. In Seattle, I'm a big fan of Pipsqueak, which is like an anarchist space, and also like Left Bank Books, like these kind of long-term spaces that are volunteer run, that put on events. And I think we need a lot more of that, and also to figure out how to, I also see when I study places like Athens, Greece, or other places where people have taken the space and pushed the police out and had kind of street battles that have created, there's a story that was up my friend just reminded me of, that I saw myself when I was in Athens, of like, there's a long history of, this uprising in 2009 there, where the police were really on the back foot, people really like, in the streets being really militant against like the austerity measures and stuff. And as a result of that, there was a lot of experimentation, a lot of people doing like outside assemblies and that kind of stuff that we see in movements all over the world. And that also we saw during Occupy in the US, and we've seen at different moments. We saw in 2020 in Seattle with the kind of police-free zone. But in Athens, you saw like a next level of this. Like there was this moment in Exarcheia, which is this like police-free for like 40 years neighborhood. There was a moment when like there was like a hotel that was scheduled to be built somewhere, and like the people like went in there and in one day like it was like kind of parking garage, dug it all up, pushed it all out, made it into a garden, and have guarded it ever since, like guarded this from police intrusion. Like I like to circuit those stories, which are less common in the US, where we have less militant movements in a lot of ways. We have less wins around squatting or around like actually taking space, and just remind us of, are there any moments where we've seen that, and the value of practicing that ever, even practicing it temporarily in spaces like the No DAPL, No Dakota Access Pipeline camp, or the Occupy encampments, or the police free zones in New York, or other places that happened in 2020. Like just really noticing how meaningful it is to take some space because of exactly what you're saying about how all the space is like corporate, commercial, policed. And that has such an effect on feeling relaxed and being together. And also, I mean, one thing I noticed too when I go to the other places is that like people just stay in the same cafe for like 5-6 hours. Whereas in Seattle, it's like the rents are high. All the restaurants can barely exist because of the prices, everything is so high. And so it's like, get out. It just really, it's like the capitalism is just impacting people's ability to connect at all.
Right. It's almost as if we're conditioned to be treated as commodities, right? And then we then therefore treat everybody else like a commodity.
Well, so I think this touches on another theme of the book that really focuses on the idea of practice. So you highlight sort of 3 phrases or ideas that really capture the importance of practice, and I want to highlight those for our readers. The first is, we are what we practice, and we are always practicing something. The second is, how you do anything is how you do everything. And the third is, what you pay attention to grows. And I'm hoping you can elaborate a little bit on those ideas and sort of how you've learned the idea of practice and learned how to kind of evolve your own practice, and how you've been kind of helping other people to realize how they can evolve their practices as a sort of central pillar of liberatory work.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I love that part, and that idea is really pivotal for my own personal healing work, and I think it's useful for everything we do collectively. And those ideas for me, like I just heard that said by Adrienne Marie Brown says what you pay attention to grows in emergent strategy, but like that's a good, really central idea in Buddhism. It's like I heard a lot from my somatics teachers. There's it's just I think you just hear that idea in so many different traditions. And for me, there's a few things about that. Like the idea is like you're always practicing something. Like what am I unconsciously doing? Am I unconsciously having thoughts about how everyone's out to get me? Am I unconsciously always criticizing my body and appearance, or always criticizing other people's bodies and appearances? Am I unconsciously always craving being rich, or like whatever? Are the thoughts and practices going through me things I chose, or are they things I inherited from a toxic society, or from something I had to do to get by at some point? Like, a lot of people like push everyone away because that was something they needed to do to get by at some point, but now they feel lonely. Or a lot of people like, are doormat and just accept connection with anybody, give everybody what they want, but now because that was the way to get by at some point, but now it's not working for them, and they're like, I hate this. So how am I practicing? What am I practicing, and what does it have to do with what I want things to be like? And these are the same kind of questions we ask ourselves, like, what am I practicing regarding white supremacy? What am I practicing regarding patriarchy? Like, what thoughts are going through my head? Who wrote those? Do I want to believe that? How am I treating other people according to a script that I want to reject now? And it doesn't just happen. You have to be like, oh, there it is in my head again. There it is in my behavior again. That's a lifelong process, and that's true with all of this stuff. And this idea, how I do anything is how I do everything. For me, like that really comes up around like rushing myself, or like doing everything too fast, doing everything with self-criticism, doing everything with fear and shame behind it. Just whatever it is, like just like what are some dominant sensations that I am practicing? Do I have any choice where I think I don't have choice? And I think for a lot of us, this is not easy. It's not like, I think one of the problems of self-help is it's often like, just do this and in 20 minutes, you'll feel better. In 30 days, you'll feel better. And it's like, actually, no, it's like a lifelong journey. And most of us are going to keep noticing a lot of the same practices come up, especially when we're under stress. So like, I'm, do a decade of work on shame, and then I'm under a lot of stress and I'm feeling a lot of shame again. And just being like, oh, that's okay. But it's totally different to notice it. Like if if I notice it's happening, if I'm having a strong feeling, I'm like, oh, I noticed this is the same feeling I had as a kid, or this is a feeling I have often when that is so different than not noticing it. And then I'm just acting out. Then I'm just pressing send on this weird email to you, or I'm yelling at you, or I'm retreating from our relationship when I actually really want the connection, or whatever my autopilot stuff is. Like if I practice noticing what I'm practicing, then I might have moments where I can pivot, or where I can apologize to you, or where I can return, or where I can be like, oh, whenever Marcus and I are disagreeing, I have this story in my head. I'm gonna remember, oh, that story isn't. I always remember later it's not true. It's actually a story I have that's a fear from childhood or whatever. I'm gonna try to. I just heard the story come through. I'm gonna try to notice it this time and say that's probably not true. Like those kind of moves. That's like mastery. We're never gonna get rid of this stuff. You know what I mean? The mastery. I think my highest goal for myself is just like, could I notice what I'm practicing and make some choices sometimes, and how much liberation there is in that. That's it.
Yes.
That's everything. Being aware. I think so much of this book is just like, could I be more aware of what's happening to me instead of just running a script? And a couple of those things that are important for our movements in this kind of crisis time that we're talking about is like, what do I do when other people are stressed out and raging or crying or whatever in front of me? Can I make any choices about how I respond to crisis? What happens when I think I've been, this is a huge one for us. I just invented like a new workshop about this. Like, what about when I think I'm the victim? Because most of us do the most harm when we are like, other people have done something to me. That's when we destroy the group. That's when we stalk somebody. That's when we go into someone's phone, whatever, like the weird dating stuff, but also the weird actual stuff. That's when we violate each other's privacy. That's when we act out, is when we think something bad has happened to us. And it doesn't mean something bad hasn't happened, but what we want to do is be like, oh, that's the moment to pay attention to whether I'm about to do something that is outside my values. And if you know that I'm in that zone and you're my friend, instead of being like, yeah, that's right, Dean, fuck them, they're all bad, you could be like, Dean, yes, and I'm really hearing you, and I'm really empathizing with what happened for you, Dean, et cetera. And if I'm about to go plan something messed up, you're supposed to actually help me not do that, because that's not real. That's not who I really want to be. So part of it is like, can we pay attention to the practices that we do under stress? Because also, it's going to all be more stressful than ever. Right now, when I talk to all my friends on the phone, everyone's supporting like 10 people in crisis right now. There's so much bad stuff happening. People are getting hurt by the cops right now. People are, their loved ones are being deported. They're afraid for their safety. There's so much to be activated about. So if we're all supporting people in crisis, it's time to notice, what are my practices and how might I want to bring them, sharpen them more towards how I want to be here for others and how I want to be when I'm in crisis. Like that's the level we're going to be living under, that, one way or another for the ongoing period, for the rest of our lives. There's going to just be crisis and disaster. So what is it like to try to practice for that?
Yeah. I feel like that is the most important reminder right now. And it also sounds like you're encouraging people to do the practice of noticing in a non-self-judgmental way. I think that's the other really important piece of this, which is oftentimes when we're noticing with ourselves or noticing with other people, it can spiral into judgment.
Yeah, I mean, the whole book is about that for me. That I'm so judgmental of myself. It's they talk about it. In Buddhism, the second error. Like the first error is the pain you're in. The second is like your judgment of the pain. I shouldn't be in this pain. I'm in this pain because I did something wrong. It's like, can I just be like, oh, I'm angry, or I'm jealous, or I'm scared, or I'm ashamed, and then just be like, oh, yeah. And it doesn't have to be like, that's wonderful. I'm not gonna get there in this lifetime. Let's be real. But it can just be like, yeah, that's how it is right now.
Yep.
Well, Dean, I'm a stepdad, and so recently I've become much more cognizant of, or I should say, aware of some of the things that are going on in the quote unquote manosphere, and this it's seemingly ongoing conversation about these the issues and the crisis with with men, because it seems like they're the only, white men specifically, it seems like they're the only one who are having crisis. And I don't obviously want to trivialize some of the data coming around the uptick in suicides and so forth, but what I have found is sort of what's missing in this conversation is any type of true sort of understanding as to why they're suffering that doesn't involve quite frankly, marginalized communities needing to kowtow and bow again to them. And I said that to say, I remember talking to a young man who I mentor, and he had gone down sort of, I don't want to say gone down the rabbit hole, but he was reading things like Jordan Peterson. He was sort of curious about folks like Andrew Tate and Andrew Huberman, who folks don't know, they're very prominent figures in the quote unquote bloggist sphere, in terms of folks who sort of gravitate towards this narrative that men are in crisis and we need to I'm being reductionary here, but essentially get rid of wokeness and get rid of feminism and so forth. And he came across your work and he said, my God, like, you know what? Somebody finally told me, something that I needed to hear. And it's basically that life is just fucking hard. and we need to actually just embrace the fact that it is hard and actually, you know, encounter life in that way and just be real to that there is no sort of magic wand or quick fix. And to your point that you brought up earlier, it's like, life is going to be, I'm paraphrasing here, but life is going to be the struggle that we deal with as long as we are alive. And so I want to ask you, just because of, as a journalist and a podcaster, it's just seeing so much sort of conjecture around what is really ailing men here in the United States and so forth. Can you just talk a little bit about sort of the pervasiveness of, this sort of ideology that is creeping up and honestly being adopted, by elected folks, even on the left with some, with certain Democrats, and what we really need, the message that we, folks really need to be hearing right now, just in terms of the honest truth.
Yeah, it's so interesting. When you talk about this, I mean, one thing it makes me think about is like all the research about how like boys and men are touched less, and like just how do you create people who are really isolated from others, who are told not to be empathetic or feel things that are considered soft, from early ages? How like pre-verbal boys get these messages about touch and about connection. How do you create people who are really told that connection isn't safe? And then what do those people go on to do? What are the ways that they get their needs met in that dysfunctional setting? I think about that a lot. And I think about, I also, when you were talking, I thought about how sometimes there's this feeling like, or you get narratives like this amongst queers and trans people sometimes, like straight people or cis people are like it seems so hard to be them because they're stuck in scripts or something like that. Like it's hard to be us because like we are experiencing all these forms of violence and discrimination all the time, and that ends our lives early, and that's all really terrible. But sometimes it's just like, at least we don't believe that stuff. You know what I mean? Like about ourselves and each other. Like that's, it's flip and maybe not like totally kind and over, it's reductionist. But I think there's something real about the suffering that comes from like when you are pushed out of your family and your religion and your community and have to go find it with other weirdos. That's horrible. And a lot of people don't live to tell the tale. And a lot of people have a lot of like chronic, horrible, lifelong experiences from that. And freedom from those scripts is also a gift. You know what I mean? So the question is, how can we get more people that freedom? Like how can more people stop seeing themselves through the lens? And in some ways, I think that's happening. Like there's so many people who are coming out as non-binary and trans, especially young people, like outrageous numbers of people. Like there's a reason that our opponents are scared of us, because it's like our ideas are popular, like their children are becoming us, and that is so beautiful to me. I mean, when you're in Seattle, I know you both see it, like there are so many trans women in Seattle. I think it's the most trans women place I've ever been on earth. And I really look for these things. And it's so beautiful to think about what are the conditions that are allowing people to play with their lives and identities and ask themselves questions about who they are, and be with their bodies and their identities in like ways that break rules that have been applied to them from this gender socialization, these messages they've received about who they're supposed to be. And so I want that for everybody, not everybody to have certain identities, but everybody to get to mess around and be like, I'm gonna try this, I'm gonna wear this, I'm gonna have this kind of sex and see if I like it. I'm gonna, like, I want everyone to, I'm gonna have this kind of friendship and see if I like it. Like, I think a lot of people are really impoverished in the realm of friendship. Like, just people talk about how queers have a more developed friendship culture because we are pushed out of families and other institutions. And so a lot of us rely on people we're not related to by blood. And we have a long history of like really taking care of each other, like the way some people think families should take care of each other. And our friendships are often more developed because we're also not like obligated to give all our time to like families and stuff like that because they don't want us. And that is amazing. Friendship, as I talk about in the book, I think is the most liberated relational space in our culture, the place where you're most likely to like give someone honest feedback, really want what's best for the other person, like not try to control them. Not that we don't do those things sometimes in friendships, but like compared to lovers and family members, we treat friendship in these more liberated ways frequently because the society doesn't have as big a story about what it has to be like and what you have to get from this person. And so, yeah, I'm curious about what's possible. I think a lot of people I know have done like really interesting youth work, like people I know who've done like healthy relationship classes in high schools, or like classes about getting, avoiding dating violence, or I have, close to somebody who's like a radical sex ed teacher for 20 years in the Portland public school system, or like who've tried to bring ideas to young people that let them out of some of these scripts. And I want this book to have some of that. I tried to write it in a way that would be readable for a lot of different kinds of readers, especially about the romance myth, because I think a lot of teens and even tweens, like that's one of the first areas where people start to play out like gross gender role stuff on each other through dating and sex, and even experimentation with the idea of a crush or whatever, and feeling horrible about each other and feeling some people are disposable and undesirable, and where friendship starts to get sidelined and people start to ditch their friends for their dates or for people they want to date and start to like betray each other a lot. And like, I think a lot happens there. And instead, those ages can be places of like major, like being like, who cares what family and school have said? I'm going to choose what my friends say. Like, it can be a time of like majorly choosing your friends and getting reshaped by your friends. And then maybe even having fun dating and sex experiences where you get support from your friends. So that's, I think, a question that I'm wondering about for when we think about what's happening to people who are living under the like marker of men. It's just like
Right.
stuck scripts, like unfair scripts that I think there's true suffering there. I have compassion for it. And those are some of the most dangerous people in our society. Like like when I see like a group of like white men out on the street, I'm like, oh God, like it's like drunk white men are the scariest people on earth to me. Next, white police officers, all police officers, those kinds of people, right? And so what is their suffering? What are they? That's a reason. That's kind of empathy I think we should also have, not to reshape the society to avoid them being challenged and getting feedback, but instead to reshape the society to move them towards gentleness and connection with others so that they can have more satisfaction and engage in less violence.
Yeah, I mean, and to your point earlier, right? I mean, as you said, like folks who believe that themselves are the victims are the ones who many times cause the most harm, and that's extremely dangerous when you are the sort of dominant class within a society. So I want to bring up something that you talked about earlier, just how punitive our society is, because the latter part of your book deals with repair, and you write about essentially that there's no real template for repair in our society, or at least the practice of it with any type of normalcy. And so I want to ask you, how can sort of practicing repair in our interpersonal relationships potentially lead to repair in our society, particularly at a time period when it is so, I don't know, hyper polarized?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I mean, I think one thing too is like, when people think about forgiveness or repair, they often think about like the worst thing that ever happened. And it's really hard to start there. Or like also like in our groups or in our relationships and stuff, it's like we try to push down what's happening until it's so bad. And that's actually really hard. So then I blow up at you and I'm like, you've done this for 2 years and I've been pissed the whole time, or you never did the dishes, or you never initiated sex, or you always, like whatever my thing is. Or I just disappear from the relationship because you keep doing something that's not working for me and I can't say it. And so I just ghost. a lot of people leave groups, leave groups this way, or leave dating relationships or friendships. We're like so afraid to do the initial feedback. And like, so repair isn't possible without like the feedback. And it's much harder to repair something that's like really broken, because then I blew up at you and actually said really unfair things about you. And now you're injured by me. Like, we're just at that point, like there's a lot of like, it'll often get pretty deep woundings. Whereas if I just the first few times a day be able to be like, when you say that, it sometimes hurts my feelings, or sometimes you don't call me back, I feel, or all the little stuff. And so one thing I really recommend to people, like for just even starting this process of learning that kind of accountability or repair, is just, it starts with like giving and receiving feedback. And then most of us have very little practice giving feedback, like I just described, and we have very little practice receiving it. So like if you say to me like, oh, hey, Dean, when you come late to the meetings, sometimes I feel like you don't value my time, or when you didn't call me back, or when you missed my birthday, or whatever, when you invite other people but not me, whatever. If I haven't heard that much, I might be really defensive. Like that's part of why we're all so afraid of giving feedback, is because people are actually incredibly defensive. We're like, oh my God, they want to throw me away forever, because we live in this society that's super punitive. So I can't imagine just getting some feedback. So we have to do this thing where we're like, okay, my friend is giving me feedback. I'm gonna say thank you. Even though right now I'm feeling scared, And so a lot of times I talk to people about doing a thing where like, if someone gives you feedback, first of all, remember they're giving me this feedback because I'm important. Nobody gives feedback unless like they're telling me this because they think I'm an important person in this group, or I'm important to them, or I'm influential in our thinking, or whatever. Like, I feel like I'm being kicked, but actually this person is saying you're important, even if they're saying it mean. This is really big, because a lot of times when we're in community, we don't know someone sees us as a leader, and we feel like just, a little puppy dog or whatever, like we don't feel very important, but actually someone else thinks you're a leader because you got here first, or because you said something in the meeting that they thought was cool, or because people regard you in some way you don't know. And then they come at you like you're a leader and you're ruining their life or whatever. And you got to be like, okay, this person thinks I'm important. That's why they're so mad. Why else would they give a fuck about whether I did or didn't do that thing or say that thing? So, and they might be coming with like a cumulative injury around being left out or whatever, right? So how can I be someone who's like, when feedback comes, I at least in the moment orient towards like listening and not being defensive. That is, because the thing is, if you withhold the feedback from me because you think it'll like keep our relationship going, actually it's destroying our relationship and moving us apart, because you're not telling me what's really going on for you. But if you say to me, Dean, it hurts my feelings when you whatever, and then I say, thank you for telling me that, and maybe I even try to change my behavior, now you trust me like you never trusted anyone, because this is so rare in our society. Now we're like besties forever, because I just showed I was trustworthy in a way that's incredibly rare. So either of us practicing giving and receiving feedback, and all the groups I work with, I'm like, we're going to have a training about this, even if it's 20 minutes, and have a litany that you say at the beginning and end of every meeting, that this is a space where we believe in making mistakes together and asking for apologies and doing repair, and like reminding each other that, because then I can go up to you and be like, oh, hey, remember that thing about how we said we should get feedback? Like it gives me an entryway that we're going to try this. And the thing I talk about in the book is that almost none of us have had major experiences in our lives of being hurt, telling someone that they hurt us, asking them to apologize, having them give a meaningful apology and change their behavior. Like that is so rare because of all things I just said. And especially with people like lovers, parents, bosses, like it really is unlikely to have happened. So, and I talk about how I had an experience of being with a lover for 7 years, during which he was alcoholic, and having him get sober, and then having us do repair around it, and how it changed my life to have one solid experience of actual repair and forgiveness. I want everyone to have this. And the only way we get there is with all the little things, it's just like, it's not, doesn't mean it's not worthwhile. I engage in processes all the time with people who are trying to deal with big conflicts and repair them, but they're a lot harder to get satisfying repair on than if you've sowed the ground with skilling that up and building that trust. And I think it's, this is a thing. It's like, I work with all these groups, and what I see a lot is just like groups that are doing really important work to, stop wars and, poisoning the earth and all these things, are like, we don't have time to do this stuff about our process and our relationships. And then they usually reach out to me when they already are having the major conflict that is going to come within 1 to 12 months of doing anything you care about with others. And if you do this stuff on the front end and you build some skills and make some agreements with how we're going to try to do it, you often avoid some of those big, intractable, group destroying, project destroying, people destroying conflicts. And so that's what I'm hoping in this, is that people will practice this stuff like in their friendships with their lovers, their roommates, and get some of those muscles that when you come up to me and are like, "Hey, Dean, when you're late, it won't be," I'm like, "Oh, okay." Like, yeah, sorry, I was late. I'm gonna try to be less late for you. Thank you. You know, like because I got some muscle around knowing it doesn't mean you're throwing me away.
And in fact, that's how we build these stronger relationships, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the coolest and, at least for me, most innovative ideas in the book is this thing that you call revolutionary promiscuity, wherein we intentionally create what you call promiscuous support systems that sort of run counter to this sort of idea of exclusivity and scarcity within how we support each other's needs. Can you help us understand some models of what revolutionary promiscuity looks like, or what you hope people will be kind of investing in as they kind of unlearn this scarcity and exclusivity and punishment culture around their relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one way I think about this, right? So it's like I just, the research says that most people have very few intimate contacts, very few people with whom they would share like really good news or bad news. A lot of people have it's just their lover if they have like a spouse or lover, and a lot of people don't have anybody in our society, and most people don't have that many people. They have like 2 friends or something like that who you really say if something was super hard, or super good. And we all just need like really deep benches of support, especially now when like bad things are happening to everyone and are going to be happening to everyone. And everyone's also seeing the headlines. It's like the stress of it all, the stress of every part of it that's touching your life, touching one degree away, 2 degrees away, and witnessing everything we're witnessing globally. And so the idea of revolutionary promiscuity for me, it is, I was thinking about, one thing I thought about is like something that people talk about a lot in terms of the 80s and AIDS crisis in the US is like how people suddenly had to take care of all their friends. And like, it's like you could end up supporting someone in the hospital who like you don't really know personally, but like, you've been to parties with them. Like just a kind of level of support. And I was thinking about this one time, my ex-boyfriend sent me like a GoFundMe for someone. Maybe I saw it on Instagram or something, for someone who like I knew my ex-boyfriend had once fucked. And I was like, I feel intimacy with this person. I've never met this person, but I
Yeah.
want to like, donate to their whatever, just like how can we have more of that? Like more of just like claiming each other, feeling caring for each other, and knowing each other enough to ask for help, like I have a friend who's been in the hospital lately and just like being on the Signal thread and watching all of these different people like take these shifts to go visit, and like just like how many people it takes to do this well and how bad it is. I'm sure you've known people. I've known a lot of people who are caring for an elder and it's just them. There's just one person doing all of the care work, and it'll just burn you out, and it's so hard. Like we just all need these deep benches. And in the book, I talk about trying to treat our lovers more like our friends and our friends more like our lovers. And part of that is like exclusivity is a thing that I think is really dominant with lovers. And so can we have less exclusivity? Like, can I be more emotionally promiscuous? So like instead of being like my lover will meet 100% of my needs, if I'm monogamous or whatever, instead being like, oh, like this is true for me, this kind of way of relating with people. Like this is my friend who I really want to talk to about everything that's really annoying at my job. And this is my friend who I really want to talk to about my favorite ideas in anarchism. And this is my friend who, like when someone dies in my family, I want him to go with me to the funeral. And this is my friend who I talk to about, having an alcoholic parent. And this is my, and multiple people in all those categories, and just having people, letting everyone be what they are best to you and how you connect with them, instead of being like, you have to be everything to me. And and then people are super disappointed and resentful in their relationships because they want one person to be everything or 2 people to be everything or whatever it is. And focusing so much, especially on lovers. And so if we're going to treat our lovers more like friends, we might be like less controlling of them. We might be more interested in them having the diverse support system that they need. We might be like, instead of being like, I can't believe you're thinking about going to grad school, you're going to ruin our lives. Instead, be like, I want you to do what's good for you. What are you thinking about? Like you have a new interest and you're hanging out with a bunch of new people. Great. Like the ways we might be more with friends. And then also treating our friends more like we treat our lovers, like that specialness, that like, let's celebrate our friendiversary. Let's have a special sleepover. Let's have more physical touch in our friendship and that kind of support. So that's not only with lovers. Like, let's actually, let's go on a trip together. Like, let's like back each other up and have devotion the way that people often do with lovers. And I think that is part of it. And I think there's also just in here a warning about exclusivity. Like, using exclusivity as specialness is a trap with a friend or a lover. So if I'm just like, we always go on this camping trip and now I'm mad because you, my best friend, are going on a camping trip with someone else, that's not good for us, or I'm mad because you, my lover, are going to go to the movies with someone else or go on vacation with someone else. And personally, I think it's useful I find it useful to explore having open relationships sexually. I think sexual promiscuity is also really beneficial to people, but also everyone should just do what they want to do. I don't have like a belief that like the one type of relationship is superior. I think you can treat people terribly in any type of relationship, and we've seen it all.
Yeah.
But for me, it has been liberating to ask myself why I was raised to think that other people's sexuality is a threat to me. And I've decided to try to have relationships in which I try to unlearn that. So I'm not seeking to use jealousy as a thing that guides my action and agreements, even though I have a lot of jealousy that's really hard, and also like literally everyone should just do whatever they want to do and try stuff. But I do think like moving to ask ourselves the question about where we've been told exclusivity will keep us safe, because I don't think it does.
Well, we want to wrap up today with a practice that's common to us on this show, and it's called 8 ounces of joy. And so at the end of every episode, Nora and I usually share what is filling our own cups, in this time period. And so I want to ask you, where are you finding 8 ounces of joy regularly these days?
I mean, the militancy of the protests against ICE kidnapping people in our communities is so beautiful. The numbers of people who are taking risks and taking bold action together and fighting back and throwing tear gas canisters back at them and, getting in the way and refusing to let them take our people. And the story about the people in New Jersey who were able to escape from the ICE facility, in part because of the ways that protesters were engaging there, and as I understand it. But the idea that we could be a movement that helps people get out of cages, and also reflecting on the history of the ways that our movements have at times been able to do that, feels really meaningful right now and is an important counterbalance to how heavy the escalation of criminalization and immigration enforcement is under this administration. So I'm just feeling so much gratitude and the beauty of people's courage, the beauty of fighting even when you don't know if you're going to win or when, the beauty of caring about each person's life who's being abducted and wanting to stop that is just really helping me.
Yeah, I think us too. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Dean, this has been such a rare privilege and a joy to be in conversation with you today. Just thank you so much for all of your hard-earned wisdom. And just thank you for living and loving in the meanwhile with us today.
I wish we could hang out in Seattle and go to the lake like right now, but maybe someday.
I know. Soon.
Yeah. Well, please get back safe from Berlin. So.
Thank you. So nice to talk to you all. Thank you so much.
Thanks
our
so
pleasure.
much, Dean.
Thank you. Wow. I wanted to say at the end to Dean, like, same time next week. I mean, my God, this is the therapy session that I absolutely needed. So
Yes. Yeah. So much wisdom in such a small episode. I really, truly wish we could keep having him on every week. But lots to carry forward and practice. So really grateful for him coming on with us.
absolutely. And I think just the practicality, of the advice as well. I think there's so often, uh, particularly in movement spaces, that people believe that the advice is just inaccessible to the everyday person, quote unquote. Like,
Hmm.
no, I mean, this is this is great. Like, I mean, this is I would say this is the only self-help book you need, quote, but at the end of the day, it's I don't want to trivialize Dean's work. It is much more than self-help. It's truly collective help.
Yes. And while we talked a lot about the big ideas in this book today, I just want to also point out to people that the book is full of these beautiful little templates and scripts and things that you can
Yes.
think about yourself. And there's all these like little nuggets that you can pick up and integrate into your daily practices, and that I'm really excited to continue using in my own life. I'm also really
Absolutely.
glad that Dean mentioned his 8 ounces of joy as something that I think you and I have been talking about a lot with listeners over the last couple weeks, and hopefully we'll be continuing to focus on, which is just these really powerful spaces of emerging resistance to ICE.
Yeah, and I'll say that that is an excellent segue into the 8 ounces of joy that both of us have, and I'll go first. I'll say,
Okay.
so often people talk about celebration as resistance, and I think many times that comes across as trite, but this month of June being both Pride Month and then
Yeah.
also the celebration of Juneteenth, those are quite frankly just both events that have been under attack, um, particularly by this administration. As a matter of fact, when we were recording on Juneteenth at a time period where um, the president is doing all he can to not even recognize that date, and the fact that living in a city like Seattle where there are just an abundance of Juneteenth events today, and just seeing folks who are coming out and truly just celebrating in a way of saying, no, you can try to erase this from history books, you can try to erase this from collective consciousness, but we are still here, we are still enjoying ourselves, and we're still gathering in collective and beloved community. um yeah, I mean, that sort of show of defiance, if you will, is something that's warming my heart today. So,
It's perfect. Yes. And always an excuse for grilling. I will show up if they're
yes,
grilling.
yes.
And
Just make
food,
sure
sharing of
yes.
food.
I will not subject anybody to my cooking, but I will do the cleaning. So, yeah.
Um, I think mine is also time related a bit, although I've been thinking a bit about June also as a time of solstice and long, long, long summer days here in Seattle. For anyone who doesn't live at this latitude, our days just go on forever at this time of year, and it produces a little bit of um, well, it produces a lot of joyousness and a little bit of kind of hyperactivity and weirdness. I I always think of June as like the weirdest month in Seattle, which I love. We have like naked bike rides and things to celebrate solstice. Um, the farmer that I get my farm share from says that during this part of the summer, they experience the opposite of seasonal affective disorder, that they experience instead what he calls seasonal overproductive disorder.
Yeah.
Um, and at a time when everything political seems so bad and so backtracking and just in such a deep backslide, um, I've been trying to just notice where growth is happening. And our plants and our systems are in this like hyperdrive of growth right now.
Yeah.
It's also my way of gracefully saying that I've given up weeding my garden, just informing my neighbors that I have given up that fight and it is over for a while.
That is like the best euphemism I've ever heard. I gotta say, Nora, that I'm gonna use that on my neighbor, as a
Yeah,
matter of fact, when
absolutely.
they're complaining about overgrowth into their yard. So you're just allowing life to grow in abundance, and that's
Exactly.
absolutely. Well, with that being said, I will go ahead and read us out today. Uh, Thank you all for joining us for another episode of In the Meanwhile. As always, a huge shout out to our fearless producer, Jessica Partnow, and to Aham Aluo for providing music for the show. You can find and follow us on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube, Instagram, or Blue Sky. New episodes drop every Friday. And until then, we'll see you in the meanwhile.